Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. A particular welcome to you if this is your first time or if you're returning to watching this live for the first time for a while. It's great to have you. We've got a lot to get through today. We've got this is an open Q&A. As always with open Q&As, we'll be moving around quite widely. This one we're not sticking to either The Witcher or Song of Ice and Fire or anything. We're going to move around wherever the conversation goes. So it could be moving around quite broadly. Got some questions. We'll definitely be covering The Witcher. We'll definitely be covering Lord of the Rings, and we'll definitely be covering some Song of Ice and Fire and House of the Dragon and anything else you want to cover. So that's where we're going to be going. As always, I give priority to questions from my patrons, so I will be working my way through them, and I'll pick up as many questions as I can from the chat as we go on. There's also, partway through, I want to give an update on what is happening with my second channel, The Well Told Tale, which is, well, the big update is that it's being relaunched as a podcast. I'm very excited about it, but more about that a little bit later. And in case I forget later, moderators in the chat, thank you. I really appreciate what you do. I have some fantastic moderators who do some brilliant work, so thank you so much. We also had one super chat before we went live. Didelphi Morphia saying, many thanks for the quality content. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. Let's first of all, let's start at The Witcher. Got a few questions about The Witcher. And for those who don't know, I'm expanding my content to cover The Witcher as well. I did a breakdown and explanation of Season 1 and the timeline in Season 1 in a video last week. I've got another video which is going to be going up in the next few days, which is explaining what a Witcher actually is. They didn't go so much into the lore and the background and exactly the explanation of what a Witcher is in the show. So if you've not read all the books, if you've not played all the video games and you just want to catch up on what a Witcher is, what skills they have, how come they get to be a Witcher, are they human, are they sort of magical, what's going on there? If you just want a hopefully relatively concise summary of what a Witcher is, my next video in that series is coming out hopefully on Saturday. It's going to be explaining all of that, so that's coming out soon. Had some questions from my Patreons. Lily Melon says, hi Robert, hope you're well. In your last live stream, you hinted at a few changes The Witcher made from the books. You said it's natural for an adaptation, but you mentioned that a few you felt changed the characters' motivations. Was wondering if there was any more that you noticed or things that you would be concerned about in Season 2 in regards to character arcs. I think this is a really interesting question because and we'll come back to this a couple of times, I think, in this live stream. The process of adapting books to TV always includes some changes because what works well on a page doesn't necessarily always work well on the screen. So I think as book readers as well as lovers of great TV, I think we accept that there will be some changes, some simplifications and all the rest of it. So what I said last time around, I was thinking of a few smaller changes, the kinds of things that are indicative of a character that I felt perhaps they slightly dropped the ball on. Things like, for example, I think I mentioned last time in the it's the first story in the books when you get Geralt there facing the Striga, and what he does is he releases in the books and also in the video games, incidentally, in a kind of a cutscene at the very beginning of the first video game, he releases the person who's responsible for all of this from his bonds and lets him run, gives him a chance to escape before the Striga catches him. And on the show, Geralt didn't do that. He just left this person tied up, and then the Striga came and ate him and all the rest of it, and he had no chance. And I felt last week, I still feel it's a small change, but it's indicative of the character that we have of Geralt, which at the beginning of the series was quite dark, didn't really let anyone in, was quite uncaring. This, I think, was what they were trying to do, was to show a character arc for him in season 1. I mentioned this in my video last week, that this was what they were trying to do, was show this character arc for Geralt from this person who's very uncaring, who's very individualistic, to someone who is accepting of destiny, accepting that working in a team is better, and all these other things. So that's his character arc, and they were trying to show that, and I think they made a few tweaks to the stories in order to try and show that slightly more dramatically. The bigger changes, though, are the kind of things like when we get, and I should probably say spoilers for season 1. I've left it a little while before talking about this, so I'm going to assume that most people have watched season 1 of The Witcher. These aren't huge spoilers, I don't think, but there's your warning nonetheless. In the books, Yennefer hears what Geralt's last wish is and is actually quite touched by it. This is the last wish that bonds her fate to his. Now, what then happens is that they have many years of this on-off relationship where they're bound together, but they kind of pulling each other apart, that we just do not see on screen. On screen in the show, what happened was that she then effectively gets told later on, oh, I bound your fate to mine. And then she has this, whoa, hang on a moment, does this mean that my feelings aren't real and all the rest of it? And then she heads off after that. So on the show, they cut right down on that a lot more complicated relationship to make it a lot more clear-cut about what happened and what the relationship is. I understand it. It's a shortcut to get to where they needed to, but it slightly simplifies the dynamic between those two characters. Similarly, in the books, when we get Geralt, you remember the scene on the show when he's there with, and he gets the promised child. So he invokes the law of surprise after we get all this magic, and we get Pavetta and Dooney, the hedgehog guy, and he's asked, what is it that you want as your reward for saving my life? And he kind of throwaway says, I invoke the law of surprise, that which you already have that you do not know, at which point we find out that Pavetta is pregnant, and so her child is Ciri. Now, in that, Geralt then rather gutturally shows that he's disappointed. He wasn't expecting that to happen. It was quite flippant and all the rest of it. And he goes and runs away for the next 16 years and tries to avoid destiny. That's not what happens in the books at all. In the books, we find that Geralt, actually, this is a way that witches quite often, this was their usual recruitment practice in a way, was that how witches can't have children. So if they want to carry on for another generation, they have to have new recruits. And this was a way that they got new recruits, was by invoking the law of surprise. So the idea that Geralt would do this kind of flippantly, it doesn't really work. The idea that he'll be disappointed, again, doesn't really work. In the books, he goes back after 6 years, not 16 years, to try and find this child, fails and heads off, and then meets her again. And it's a lot more complicated than this scenario that we're given on the show. None of which is to say that this is bad. As I started this kind of like explanation, we should expect some changes, some simplifications from books to TV shows, simply because some things don't work as well. My concern is if this is removing a layer of complexity just to make it easier for us to understand. And I think that we, as sort of advanced watchers, as people who are used to complicated storylines, I think that we don't necessarily need it. I kind of forgive it for a first series because they're bringing people into it, but I hope that that doesn't move on to the second series. So that's my fear, and that's I'm not too concerned about season 1. I think that they did a pretty good job of adapting it, but that's my overall fear in terms of going forward. Let's have a quick look through the chat. Is there Kevin Kelly saying, have you checked out Carnival Row? No, I haven't. I've heard mixed reviews, to be honest. Nicola Jurakan saying, the medallion, why does the medallion have the wolf symbol? This is an essential part of the Witcher kit. The medallion shows the wolf symbol, that's his school that he was trained in. The Witcher school is the Wolf School, and it's also it's magical. It senses magic. They didn't really play up on it, but in the books, it's made very clear. It vibrates when there is magic nearby, when there's somebody's doing a magic spell or a curse, or there's a magical being nearby. It vibrates, and it just gives him a little bit of an advantage over people. So that's what's going on with the medallion. John Webster saying, book characters and show characters are never going to be the same. The latter need to live and breathe on their own. Yeah, I agree completely. As I say, I notice these differences because they change the characters and they potentially change the plot, and I think that we need to be aware of that as readers and as viewers. That doesn't mean that these are critiques of what's happening on the show, unless it fundamentally changes things. My feeling is that they've used season 1 just to get all the pieces in the right place and moving forward. Maura Lee says, with regard to Geralt's fate and destiny tied to both Ciri and Yennefer, what do you see is going to be the outcome? Will it be similar on the show as it is in the book series? Yes, is the short answer to this. So we've had, the showrunner has been very clear. They are basing this on the books, not on the video games. So what we've got coming forward, assuming that we see the full run of this, is coverage through the 2 short story collections, and they're not just collections, by the way, they're linked. There's a sort of linkages between the short stories, and then 5 novels. Now, what we saw in season 1 was that they broadly covered the 2 short story collections and a little bit from book 1. So I think what we're looking at the moment probably is going to be the next season is going to be broadly going to be doing book 1, Blood of Elves, and then we're going to move through. So we could have, all theoretical, but we could have another 5 seasons of this, and they're not going to go beyond that. The showrunner's been very clear. They have an ending. She was asked, incidentally, as everyone's asked these days, how is she going to avoid having an ending like Game of Thrones that avoids the kind of the disappointment? And her view was the way that this is done for The Witcher is the fact that they've got the books and that they will finish when the books finish. And there is an arc in the books. It moves, the story moves through, and there is an ending. So that's where the show will end as well. Okay, so Lou Kernock says, hello, Robert. Just to say that your live stream on The Witcher inspired me to start the books. I'm a reader, not a watcher. I've only watched 3 episodes of Game of Thrones. Can't say that I was that impressed. Also getting much more out of rereads of Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings. Thank you so much. Your voice is great to paint to, apparently. Well, I love hearing what people do when listening to me. Painting is wonderful. If I can help people's creativity, that's really fantastic. I'm not sure what you were saying, whether you weren't that impressed by the TV show of Game of Thrones or the books of The Witcher. On Game of Thrones, I don't need to retread, I suspect, what everybody knows already. The first few seasons of Game of Thrones are fantastic and adhere very strong, particularly season 1. If you ever go back and read book 1 and watch season 1, very, very close adaptation. There are a few different scenes here or there. They miss out a couple of bits here or there, but it's a very close adaptation. And then it slowly diverges over time. With The Witcher, one thing I would say is do not expect, and this will come out, I'm sure, in my videos over time, do not expect, if you are used to the kind of the Tolkien legendarium and George R.R. Martin's much wider, more expansive world, not just having huge books, but also the kind of the history books, the in-world history books like The World of Ice and Fire, Fire and Blood, stuff like that. If you're used to that level of extra detail with lots of family trees, detailed maps, and all the rest of it, that's not there in The Witcher. So do not go in expecting there to be that, to be there, or that to be there. What we have instead is, I think, deliberately an attempt at a sort of a visceral, lived-through experience in the stories, which makes them work so well as video games, because we are experiencing everything primarily through this character of Geralt. Video games do move around a little bit, but mainly we're just experiencing, and we're learning stuff as he is learning things. It's not that we've got this extra huge amount of background information over there that allows us to understand greater things about what is going on or has been going on in the world. There are a few little bits of exposition, there's a few stories, a few legends, we get some songs, all the rest of it, but this isn't a created world to the same level and depth, deliberately so, as we get from Tolkien and George R.R. Martin. He didn't even do a definitive map, for example. Although that does make me think, if you are still finding yourself a little bit uncertain about the timelines in season 1, or you just want to look at a really cool interactive map, if you go onto my Twitter, just look for In Deep Geek on Twitter, you will find, I think yesterday, I tweeted out a link to the official Netflix page for The Witcher, where they have got a really impressive interactive map / timeline that shows you what's happening at different points in time and when. So you can see, oh yeah, so Yennefer's story starts all the way back there, then we get Geralt's, we get Ciri's right at the very end. So you can actually start mapping out what's happening where. I would highly recommend it. Please do go and check out that. As I say, the link is there on my Twitter feed. Incidentally, I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. If you're into either of them, just have a hunt for In Deep Geek and you will find me. Maria Sia says, did you watch Dracula on Netflix yet? I want my 3 hours back. I have watched Dracula. So I think people who watch these live streams regularly know I'm a fan of Dracula as a story. The original Bram Stoker story, I think, is excellent. It was on the BBC in this country. I think it was on Netflix worldwide. A new adaptation from Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, who are the people who did Sherlock, which I thought was a fantastic adaptation of the Sherlock stories, Sherlock Holmes stories. They weren't a straight adaptation. They were attempts to put a slightly more modern slant on an ancient story while also maintaining the feel of the original. And I think on Sherlock they got that just right. On Dracula, my take is I really enjoyed episode 1. I thought that they got that one about right. Episode 2, I felt, was a little bit middling. It kind of dragged on a little bit. Episode 3, I don't think really worked. So if you're going to watch it, that's my short review on it. I wouldn't discourage you from watching it, but I definitely think that it starts off better than it ends, if that makes sense. Kevin Kelly saying Dracula 3rd episode was a bit of a letdown. I really liked how they ended the episode. Yeah, I was actually okay about how they ended it, but it was the internal logic of quite a lot of it that didn't work for me very well. Kelly Kesh, very random question, but a really interesting one, saying, is George R. R. Martin priming us with detailed descriptions of the food? And this, incidentally, this is a thing which everyone picks up when George R. R. Martin's writing, or moving over to A Song of Ice and Fire here. He describes the food in great detail all the time. He's always describing it in great detail. Is he doing it to show us how desperate the situation will be once winter falls on Westeros and everyone starves? Thinks Stannis at the Siege of Storm. I think this is a fantastic idea. I'd not thought of that before. I mean, my take is probably it's just that he enjoys describing food, which is absolutely fine. But there will be scarcity as we get to the Winds of Winter, and we're already starting to see it. If you start reading the one of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, it's Alicent, which is the Sansa chapter, up in the Eyrie, you find that there is a whole subplot going on with Littlefinger, who is trying to control the food supply. He is hoarding food, and this sounds like just one of those minor details, but actually in warfare, in sort of medieval warfare, supply of food during wartime was hugely important. We know that food supply during winter will be hugely important. And yes, this is going to be a big theme. Whether George R. R. Martin was deliberately describing food so much before in order to contrast it, I do not know. But food and the absence of food is going to be a large theme in the last couple of books, I have to say. Marvin Martin, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, of all the fantasies, why do you think certain ones resonate more than others? Good question. I think it's well, I'm going to take you to the prologue, or the forward of, certainly in my copy, much thumbed copy of Lord of the Rings. I think it's in most of the editions. J.R.R. Tolkien went on this long, it's almost a rant about applicability, and he contrasts this to allegory, in saying you get some stories which are just allegorical, where it's just A equals B, and you can immediately tell what the person's trying to talk to you about. He, separate to that, he was a little critical of his friend C.S. Lewis in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the other Narnia stories. They are allegorical. They are about the Christian faith. And this was C.S. Lewis trying to explain the Christian faith and trying to show its reasonableness. J.R.R. Tolkien felt that actually a better way for writing fiction was to do something which was applicable. It wasn't just about one thing, but generations of readers could draw lessons from it, lessons which were applicable to them, because they weren't so obvious. It wasn't just saying A equals B. We can draw lessons from them all the time. And this was what he was trying to do. He was trying to create a mythology for the English people, effectively, for the British people. That was one of his stated aims in creating The Lord of the Rings, and he wanted something which would last through the ages, that people could draw from and gain moral lessons from, and gain inspiration from, and hope from, and learn what things to fear, what things to oppose, and all the rest of it. So what he created was something which allows us to engage as humans with. We can always engage with the courage of Samwise Gamgee, and we can always look at the Ents and the clear messages, which are sort of environmental messages. They weren't just about the context that he was concerned about, which was industrialization, but they are relevant all through history, about our nature, our relationship with the world in which we live. And so that kind of applicability for me is not just in the work of Tolkien. that's also in the work of George R.R. Martin, for example. You take George R.R. Martin, A Song of Ice and Fire is not an allegory of a specific thing, but you can draw lessons and applications from it. Lots of people draw the application about climate change, equating that to the White Walkers, while everybody's squabbling and talking about other stuff. There's this huge threat that is existential to the entire kingdom, planet even, coming from the north, and everybody's ignoring it, and people draw that. But in 100 years from now, if people are still reading these stories, I hope they are, it could be some other existential threat, I hope, if we have tackled the climate threat, obviously. But that is what it is. It's applicable. It's not just doing an analogy. And I think that, and the characters which chime with us as humans, those are the things which make some things work and other things, or resonate, I think is the word you use. And I think that's why he's those kinds of stories, they work so well. Lucky, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, hi Robert, have you read the Kingkiller Chronicles or the First Law series? If not, have you considered them? Keep up the excellent work. Well, thank you very much. I have, this was a long time ago. I feel I say this quite a lot. Kingkiller Chronicles, yes. The First Law, I think, were those were the Joe Abercrombie ones, I think. I think I've read both a long time ago, and I enjoyed both. So I think that I would, what I tend to do at the moment on this channel, and I'm trying to evolve this, maybe in a year's time we will look just at books as well as things that are on TV as well. But at the moment I'm trying to focus in on TV shows that I think are brilliant and that are intelligently written and are often based on books as well, that are wonderful and intelligently written and engaging and relevant and all the rest of it. So that's where my focus is at the moment, because those things at the moment haven't translated across onto the screen. Then I'm not covering them, but in the future perhaps I will. And I'm currently going through a reading. I've set myself a big reading list for the year, and I'm looking for high quality, particularly high quality fantasy stories to be tagging on to the end of it. I'm working my way through The Witcher again, The Witcher stories. Then I'm going to be doing The Wheel of Time, and then I'm going to be doing other things at the other side of that. So yeah. What have we got? Andrew K saying, any thoughts on the death of Christopher Tolkien? I was going to come to this later, but I'm happy to do this now. With his legacy in the Lord of the Rings universe, was a question from Oliver Grunseis. So yes, those who do not know, for those who are watching live, we had sad news today that Christopher Tolkien died earlier today. He was 95. He was the son of J.R.R. Tolkien, and he was for many decades the custodian of the Legendarium. He was the editor of the Silmarillion and many of the other fantastic stories that we've had since the release since then. And he, I don't think we can overstate his importance to the legacy of Tolkien in any way, shape, or form. I think that we wouldn't have had the breadth and depth of understanding of this world without him. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote the great stories and then had bundles of other papers all over the place, and Christopher Tolkien was the person who brought them all together and molded them into order and life. And for that, Christopher Tolkien, thank you. Yeah, so I think that I for one, his work was amazing. He took a step back recently from being the sort of the custodian of the Tolkien estate. So I don't think we're going to see any huge shift in terms of rights being provided to people or anything like that. That I think there will probably be people in the chat who know more than me. I think HarperCollins, the publishers, have still got a control over that. So I don't think we're going to see any huge change as a result of his death, but obviously it's been a great loss. Anime lover Nicole, have you read The Assassin's Apprentice? Yes, I have. In fact, on my Kindle at the moment, I am rereading The Assassin's Apprentice. I'm doing The Witcher on audiobook. Assassin's Apprentice is what I'm reading every night before bed. Love it. I've spoken about it many times. The whole Farseer series. This is Robin Hobb, for those who are unaware. Farseer series, the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy in particular, beautifully written. And I think, I mentioned this in my video I did on Jon's resurrection, Jon Snow's resurrection. I think we get huge hints about what is going to happen in his resurrection from what's in Robin Hobb's Farseer series. And I'm not just plucking that randomly out. George R. R. Martin and Robin Hobb work very closely as writers work together. They share the same publisher, agent, and they shared manuscripts while they were writing these two stories, the Game of Thrones Book 1 and Assassin's Apprentice. They shared manuscripts, commented on each other's manuscripts, and the similarities between these two stories are really, really striking. There's 7 kingdoms, 6 duchies. They're both threatened by this kind of zombie invasion in a way from outside this the kingdom. We get this character, the Jon character is a guy called Fitz, who is the bastard child of the heir to the kingdom, who was brought up in a castle, and he has got this ability to bond with animals, particularly a wolf. The amount of links between these two stories is really quite astonishing. They're written in different styles and in different ways, but they're both absolutely brilliant. I would highly recommend it. So yes, I have read them, and if anyone can tell me well, if I could choose any one set of stories to adapt into TV show, it would be that. Oliver Grunsais actually asking about the King Killer Chronicles TV show. Last I heard is that Lin-Manuel Miranda was involved. Unfortunately, that was, forget which network, might have been Showtime. Someone had got the rights, but they've now passed. So yes, Lin-Manuel Miranda is still trying to adapt this, but it currently isn't in production. So it looked promising for a while, and then some point late last year it all fell through. So we're not looking forward. We're not expecting anything there for a while. Right. And also you're asking about the Wheel of Time. I'll come on to that one a little bit later. Let's finish up with the Witcher. I've got one more question about the Witcher from Maura Lee, saying, compare and contrast the roles of prophecy and the importance of manifestation of one's destiny between the books and TV show of The Witcher and the A Song of Ice and Fire book series. Okay, so I've often compared Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire in the sort of the sense that one of the things that George R. R. Martin has been very clear on is not to give us objective truth. Everything we learn about his world is subjective. Even the history books are written from the perspective of a maester. We can't truly trust what is being said in there. And in fact, in some instances, we're kind of implicitly encouraged not to trust what's in there. Some of the language which some of the which the maesters use to describe some of the kings, clearly shows that they're trying to curry favor with the version of history that's going on there. So George R. R. Martin has been very clear. He is not going to give us this kind of objective truth about what's going on. And that means that we do not have clear understandings of how magical systems work and all the rest of it. Now, we will therefore never get a definitive answer about the importance of prophecy or destiny or anything like that in A Song of Ice and Fire. We will just be able to look at stuff from a number of different characters' angles and try and draw our own conclusions. With the Witcher stories, these are coming from Geralt's perspective, so we're seeing them from his perspective. But it is very, very much clearer, particularly on the show. They made quite a big play on this, I think, that destiny always finds its way. You cannot push against destiny. Some bits of magic, like the law of surprise, they're written so deep into the fabric of the universe that you just cannot go against them. People who are destined to be together will find a way to be together at the very end. So that's what's going on there. In terms of prophecy, the clear implication is The Witcher, that yes, you get sort of prophecy. Yes, of course, there are some people who don't do magic and make up stuff and all the rest of it, but true magic is true. Destiny is clearly a thing. There are things that are destined to happen all the way through it. When we get to the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, that's very different. Yes, you get prophecy, but what matters actually is not so much the truth of the prophecy as how people react to that, and that is what drives the action. So let's take Maggie the Frog as an example. Maggie the Frog's prophecy to Cersei, actually, it doesn't matter so much how true it is. It is pretty true, but it doesn't matter so much how true it is. What matters is how Cersei reacts to it, what she does about it, and how obsessed she becomes with Tyrion, or on the show with Marjorie. This is because that the important thing is her reaction to the prophecy. In The Witcher, the important thing is the prophecy or the destiny itself. What Geralt does actually fundamentally doesn't matter, because he is going to get drawn back to his destiny. That is the point there. So that is where the difference is between these two kind of systems. George R. R. Martin cares far more about people's reaction to stuff, and in The Witcher, and in Lord of the Rings as well, it's a slightly different world, but it's destiny. Magic will have its way. That there is truth out there with a capital T. Okay. Right, let's take, I've already talked about Christopher Tolkien. We're going to have a quick talk about Lord of the Rings, though. Anime Lover Nicole says, what do you think of the cast of Lord of the Rings, and who do you think will be playing who from that list? Okay, so we've got an announcement. We had an announcement a couple of days ago about cast for the Lord of the Rings. Now, there's a lot of things we can say about this cast. First of all, they've announced 15 names, and that's not all. They've said that there will be more names to come. There are some big roles still to cast, they say. What this tells me to start with is that this is a bit like Game of Thrones. This is going to be an ensemble piece. This isn't just like going to be focusing on one character and their story with a few other kind of supporting. This is going to be quite a broad-ranging ensemble piece, like the Lord of the Rings films were, for example. Huge cast. So I think that's the first thing we can learn from this. The second, I am delighted that we finally reached this point. They got the rights to this over 2 years ago. The release, the press release at the time said that the contract said they had to start principal filming within 2 years, which took them up to November last year, and then they'd gone very silent for a while. when we reached November last year. I was starting to get a little bit nervous, but now the fact that they've got 15 people signed up, I think we're clearly on the way. We've still got a few more people to cast, so I don't think this means that they're about to start full filming yet, though I'm sure that they're doing some bits of principal filming here and there, a few sort of little bits of background shots and all the rest of it. But I think there's still a little way to go if they've still not cast everybody. They will want to get everybody around a table for the full read through as well. So don't expect filming proper to start for another few months, I wouldn't have thought. So in terms of timing, I think we're now looking at, well, maybe earliest point is summer of next year. That's where we're looking for it. So 2021 summer, but it could well be pushed back further. We'll have to wait and see. Another point I would make is that the names that we have got, the characters that they've cast, they are, and I suspect this is deliberate, they are not big Hollywood stars, big names that everyone's heard of. They're not even like when Game of Thrones was casting. It's not even a lot of unknowns, but a few people that you have heard of, like Sean Bean or great character actors who've been around for a while. Your Charles Dances of this world. They've not gone with that. Most of these people, some of them are completely fresh out of acting school, pretty much. Some of them have been in a handful of things, but none of them are huge names. Now, the people that you may have heard of is Joseph Moore, who is the guy who was Benjen in Game of Thrones. He is going to be in there. There's also the guy who was young Ned Stark in that flashback scene to the Tower of Joy, so he's going to be in there. We've got Mordovith Clark, who was in Dracula that I've talked about, and a few other people who I'm slightly less au fait with. Markella Kavanagh was in Picnic at Hanging Rock, if you ever saw that, which I thought was really good. And Charlie Vickers, who was in Medici on Netflix. So they've got a few people who you will probably vaguely recognize, but none of them are huge names. Now, I'm actually reasonably pleased about this because they had the budget to go for anyone they wanted. But this tells me that they've gone for the people that they think are right, not just people that they think are blockbuster names that's going to get everybody tuning in. So I think that there's a real confidence that they're choosing the right people that is shown here. The question was asking who these people might be. Now, what we know about this series is that it is going to be based in the Second Age of Middle Earth. Now, that means everything you know, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you've watched the films, read the books, all of those characters you've got there, or 90% of the characters that you've got there, forget about them. Then they're not going to be involved in this. This is many, many hundreds, thousands of years before that. So what we've got are potentially a couple of characters that you will have heard of. The big two that we're sort of hearing, well, almost certainly there's going to be Sauron. Now, Sauron in the films, he's this kind of slightly disembodied figure. We just get the sort of the burning eye. Back in the Second Age, no, he could assume physical form, and he could choose which form assumed as well. And I've done a couple of videos on this if you want to go and check them out. But basically, there's a huge and what looks like a really interesting storyline, which I think they will go for. They might not, but I think they will go for, all to do with the downfall of Numenor, which is this kind of Atlantis civilization, from the height of man with wonders and beauty and all the rest of it. And then Sauron corrupts it, and there's this huge downfall. So the character of Sauron is going to be almost certainly one of the pivotal ones. And the rumors are that this is where Joseph Maul, who is Benjamin Stark, where he's going to come in. He's going to be playing Sauron. I'm reasonably happy about that. I've not seen him in anything else, so I can't speak for what he's like as a sort of a seductive, evil bad guy. But the look is definitely there, so I would go with that. There's also hints that we're going to get young Galadriel or younger Galadriel, because of course the elves have survived all the way through. Morfydd Clark apparently is going to be young Galadriel. We might get a few other characters that we know. Elrond was certainly around at the time. If you think back to the very first scene in the films, which was like this big flashback, that was at the very end of the Second Age, effectively, when you get Isildur cutting the ring off of Sauron's finger. This is after everything that's happened with Numenor. Isildur will be around as well, so we may well get an Isildur, but I've not heard anyone say who that might be. So yeah, we've got 15, and there will be more names to come. So I think we're hoping to get a few more over the weeks to come, I imagine. Okay, let's go with another question from my patrons. Christian Isidoro saying, hey Robert, so in Tolkien's lore there is a consistent theme in each age of Middle-earth, a hero who is unable to enjoy the world he saved. I'm thinking of Frodo and Erandil in the first or in the third and first ages. Given that Numenor was destroyed, do you think this theme is present in the Second Age, and might they touch upon it in the Amazon TV show? I think no is the short answer. I don't think they're going to. I mean, they might touch on it, but I don't think this is the main theme of where they're going to be going. They've got all of the Second Age to choose from, so I might be completely wrong in this. They might choose the Forging of the Rings or something along those lines, but all the hints are that they're going to be doing focusing in on Numenor. Now, Numenor. This tells me that if they're doing Numenor, it's not about some people who are saving the world, but are too wearied by it in the way that Frodo or Jon Snow, for example, in Game of Thrones, they have to leave the world because although they've saved it and they've done their bit, it's not for them anymore. I don't think we're going to be seeing that so much. We're more likely to see themes of hubris, the pride that comes before a fall. Numenor was this great civilization, and that is it's an astonishing thing to be playing with. I think that if you get this great civilization that will fall, and we know it will fall, but watching it and people still thinking that they're amazing and this civilization cannot possibly fall, and actually just reaching too far, which is what happened with the Numenorians. I think that is going to be probably the biggest theme that we're going to have there. Okay, let's have a quick moment just to tell people. I always try about halfway through a live stream just to take a moment to let people know what's going on. And I said at the beginning of this, the thing that I'm really wanting to talk about today is my second channel, which is The Well Told Tale, which is my passion project, really, which is me audio narrating what I think are the best science fiction and fantasy stories ever. I've had that running as a second YouTube channel for a while now, and I have literally just yesterday launched it as a podcast. So if you're a podcast listener, you can now find, if you go and search for The Well Told Tale, you go to iTunes or you go to Spotify or go to wherever you get your podcasts from, you should be able to find the Well Told Tale. If it's not there, let me know, and I'll get it onto that platform as well. I've tried to get it on as many as I possibly can. The idea is that in a couple of weeks' time, it will be the same content happening on both the podcast and on the YouTube channel. I'm aware that I didn't quite finish off. I took a brief hiatus from the Well Told Tale while I was sorting all of this out. I just needed to finish At the Mountains of Madness, which is a fantastic story by H.P. Lovecraft. So I'm finishing off that one on the YouTube channel over the next couple of weeks. Syncing these two up. If you look at the podcast now, you'll find a couple of stories that we've done previously on the Well Told Tale. If you didn't get a chance to listen to them before, I would recommend. We're doing The Time Machine, Call of Cthulhu, and also Fall of House of Usher, which is a great Edgar Allan Poe story. So they're all on there already, and then we're going to do joint content going forward. So if you listen to podcasts, please do go sign up for them, download them, and it would do me a huge favor if you leave a positive comment as well. That's the kind of thing that really kind of boosts things up the chart, is if it has lots of sort of thumbs up and positive comments and all the rest of it. If we can get it onto the sort of the new and notable things, or noteworthy, whatever they call them on iTunes, these are the things that they look for. So if you people often ask, no, I can't afford to support you on Patreon, but are there any other ways that I can support you? This is one of those ways. It will cost you nothing just to go to wherever you get your podcasts from, download it, subscribe, and leave a positive comment. That will be absolutely fantastic. Thank you. So that's coming up. I mentioned that I took a brief hiatus. My patrons over on the Well Told Tales have stuck with me through that, and I am incredibly grateful to them. As a thank you, I'm doing two things. The January payment, or the end of January payment, I'm going to skip for everybody who has been a patron of the Well Told Tale. I didn't put any content out for a few weeks, and so I think it's only fair if I skip that payment for you. And then secondly, if you're on the Patreon page, if you give me your address, I will send you just a small thank you gift, just to say I really appreciate sticking by me, and I've got big things planned for the Well Told Tale. Looking further forward, as well as having it as a podcast, I'm also looking to be producing some of the stories as standalone audiobooks. So that's something else that we've got looking into the future. So that's that. What else shall I say? So I've got more Witcher on our main channel. I've got more Witcher content coming up. I've got more Lord of the Rings content coming up, and I am going to finish up the series, my Robert's Rebellion series. There will soon be another video on why Ned went to Starfall. So that's the next one on that series. We've got what else is going on? I think I will. Oh, patrons. I almost forgot. Patrons of Deep Geek. Thank you. I say this every week. I mean it every week. Thank you. One of the other things I'm looking to do this year, as we go through the year, is look to see what more content can I provide for my patrons, because I cannot do this without your support, and I hugely appreciate that. So over the next few weeks, keep an eye out. I will be providing a few extra things just for my patrons, like some bonus travelers guides just for my patrons. I say it on all of my travelers guides that they are done with the support of my patrons, and this is a way to say thank you to my patrons, is do some exclusive travelers guides to a few spots that we sort of passed by when doing the travelers guide, that perhaps aren't worth a full episode, but they definitely are worth a visit. So I'm going to be doing a few of them just for my patrons, so keep an eye out for them in the weeks to come. If you are at all interested in supporting the channel, or you want to get access to things like that I've already talked about, there is a link down in the description to my Patreon page. It's just a way to support the channel, get access to some extra content. Let's pick up on a couple of other things as we talk about the wider world. One Bridge 11 says, "Do you like the current Doctor Who?" Assuming you mean the current series. I did have a question from. I can't remember where it's gone now. One of my patrons was asking. I think it might have been Leaf Underhill. Yes, was talking about Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who. I will always love Doctor Who. This latest series hasn't grabbed me yet. I will admit that it did. The last 5 minutes of episode 1 did. They really did grab me. But I will continue watching Doctor Who forever. It's just a part of who I am and my soul. One thing to flag up for Westworld, those who are fans of Westworld, I love Westworld. They have announced a date for season 3, which is March the 15th. And they've done, as they always do, they've done some fantastic teaser content, particularly on their Twitter feed, but I'm sure it'll be ramping up over the next few weeks. I will be covering Westworld Season 3 in full. What that means is that I will be doing a pre-show live stream, as I did last time with Season 2, a pre-show live stream, 10 o'clock my time, that's 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Sunday before the show comes out. 2 hours discussing the previous week's episode and the next week's episode. I'll have some special guests on each time just to work our way through that, just get a little bit excited before the show. I will be doing episode breakdowns after every episode. Within 24 hours of the episode airing, I will have my episode breakdown up and running, and I will try and do at least one more video on it each week. Either like a trailer breakdown or perhaps just an issue. If there's a burning issue, a question that a lot of people are asking about it, then I will cover that in a video each week. So I'm going to be giving full coverage to Westworld. I'm going to carry on doing the other videos that I do as much as I can. Carry on with my normal Thursday live streams as well, covering a wider range of things, not just Westworld, but everything else that's going on. I will be doing my regular Song of Ice and Fire, Witcher, Lord of the Rings videos through that period as well. But I will be majoring in on Westworld while it's up. 8 episodes for season 3 there will be, so I'll be going through from 15th of March through to, I think, the first week in May. Let's Stephanie B asking, Traveler's Guide to Middle Earth. A lot of people ask this. Yes, I would love to do it, and I will do it, I'm sure, at some point. I'm going to take it. We've got, I think, 5 more Traveler's Guides before I reach the end, which thankfully comes to around the same time as Westworld starts up. I will take a brief pause then from the Traveler's Guide. I've been doing that pretty much non-stop for nearly 2 years now. So I'm going to take a little brief break from that, do another couple of things. But yes, people ask about Traveler's Guide to Middle Earth. I'm very aware. I'm something I would love to do. So keep on asking me. I will come back to it. Do not worry. Oliver Gunsice says, did you see The Boys? I did. I loved The Boys on Amazon. It was fantastic. I'd be interested to see where they go for season 2. It worked really well for me in one season, and I would be very happy if they left it at that point. But season 2, I'd be interested to see where they go with it. Sonata Systems saying, what's your opinion of Tolkien, the 2019 biofilm? I really enjoyed it. I really did. It's not it's not sort of life-changingly good, which sounds like I'm damning it with faint praise, but I came out with my heart filled with joy and loving the world of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien as a person even more than I had done before, which I didn't think was possible. Nicholas Hoult gives a fantastic performance as a sort of a young Professor Tolkien, and you get so many just sort of insights into where a lot of this world and imagination came from. So yes, I would very much recommend it. If you haven't seen it, if you're a fan of Tolkien, then please do go and see it. I thought it was really, really good. Let's have a quick flick through, see if there's any more any more questions. Fraser said, yes, there was a Tolkien biopic. Absolutely. Monkey Tron, thank you so much about The Witcher. With the timeline, yeah, I figured that the timeline seemed to be the thing that most people were not so sure about. The X Factor 04, do we know what time period the new Lord of the Rings show is taking place in? Yes, Second Age it's going to be taking place in. We don't know specifically any more than that, but they've kept things very close. It has to be said, my feeling is probably because when they signed it because Amazon wanted to have the rights to do a Lord of the Rings thing, not because they had a specific story that they wanted to tell. And so the story has evolved over time since then. So that's why they've kept it quite close. But the hints are this is to do with Numenor in the Second Age. Nay Bliss saying, big fan of your channel. Thank you. Are you a Wheel of Time fan? Any plans to discuss the Amazon show when it is out? Yeah, I was going to talk about that actually. So the Wheel of Time, for those who don't know it, was an epic fantasy book series by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. Robert Jordan unfortunately died before finishing it. Don't nobody say GRRM, but this is the fear, obviously. But Robert Jordan did not finish it. Brandon Sanderson finished it off based upon his notes. Now, they have now, this is Amazon have bought the rights to this, and it is being adapted into a TV show. I have read the first 3 books in the Wheel of Time a long time ago. I am going to reread them. I am open-minded at the moment as to whether I cover this. I think I'm going to wait and see what the trailers look like and things like that, see whether there's interest from people. So, I mean, do let me know if this is something you'd be particularly interested in. My understanding is that this is, as we were talking about before, this is an adaptation of the books. So yes, it will be the books, but the books are sprawling. Sometimes the action, and I say this with love, slows down to a crawl because there are so many different things going on. One of the books, Crossroads at Midnight, legendarily, I think it just takes one day, but because there are so many plot lines just having to move forward just a few inches at this critical moment. This will be cut down, made a lot more concise for the TV show. Brandon Sanderson has been involved. He's not the showrunner. He's not writing it or anything like that, but he has been consulted. And he's been making the right sort of mood noises about it. He's been saying these things as well. They're cutting it down. It's going to be just the main storyline going through. They've got Rosamund Pike, who's going to be, I think it's Morgaine from memory, from the Aes Sedai. She's going to be. She wasn't really the main character in the books, but she is. It looks like they're going to focus in on her as the main character on the show. So I'm intrigued. They're currently filming it. They're a few months into filming, so I don't know when we're going to see it. Possibly towards the end of this year, possibly early next year. We'll have to wait and see. They haven't said yet. But yeah, it looks it's Amazon. It's going to be big budget. I'm sure it will look gorgeous as well. So a few people saying that they would be interested in it. I think the other thing I would sort of say, and this perhaps is slightly too well, I don't know. I think that Amazon will also be using it as a forerunner to the Lord of the Rings, to help them understand how they can maximize the Lord of the Rings, because this is 6 months to a year ahead of the Lord of the Rings TV show. And I think that they will probably be trying to make a lot of decisions like Is this going to be done as a weekly show, or is it just going to be done as one big binge? How do we best engage the fans with this? How do we build interest going up to it? These are the kinds of things that I suspect that Amazon, they're going to be using the Wheel of Time, which they spent a lot of money on, but not as much money as they're spending on Lord of the Rings, which has got a dedicated fan base, but not as big a dedicated fan base as Lord of the Rings. I think that we're using lessons from that to help inform how they, not how they produce the Lord of the Rings, but how they promote it. So I think that that's one of the other things that they're going to be doing. Perhaps that's just my brain being a little bit too Machiavellian for that one. I don't know. And yes, people, I would prefer this to be a weekly show. It works a lot better for me. I think it gives us a chance to discuss things as we're going through. If you just have it as a binge show, you can you never know where everyone else is on it. If you have it on a weekly show, then it allows us as a fandom to be able to engage with things as they're going along. So I much prefer this. Monkeytron gives us more chat online. It's more fun. I agree it. Okay, so I think. Oh, the other thing. There are so many shows. I should have said there's so much news that's been coming out in the last week or so, because there are so many great shows in production. The other one that we've had news about, for those who missed it, was House of the Dragon, which is the Game of Thrones spin-off. Now, we've had confirmation that it is likely to land, or not likely to land, until 2022. Now, that is probably not too surprising. The language that was used was that they're starting to write it, which I think tells us where it is in production. So they had the script, effectively they had the script for a pilot ready, or almost ready. They decided not to go ahead with the pilot. They've got a whole season ordered already for this. But that means that they've got to write the other 9 or whatever episodes to make the full season. Then they've got to go off and do the casting and choosing locations and getting directors and all of that stuff. So it is going to take a long while. And the HBO do not wish to blow this inheritance that they've got from Game of Thrones. This is part of the reason I suspect that they didn't go with the Jane Goldman Long Night idea in the end. They went for the banker with the dragons and the Targaryens because they knew that people would like dragons and Targaryens. We also, with that, had confirmation that the other spin-offs that we've heard rumors of, that there were, at one point there were 5 of them sort of in production. The other 3 are on pause. They're just going to be focusing in on House of the Dragon first. They're not saying that these other things aren't going to happen, but they are saying they're going to do this one first and then maybe consider doing some other ones after that. So that's where we're at in terms of that. So don't expect any sort of exciting casting news for at least 6 months and quite possibly for a year, I wouldn't have thought. George R.R. Martin is involved in this. And so I think that although they haven't said this, if he is being true to his word and prioritizing writing The Winds of Winter, then he will be doing that rather than House of the Dragon. And so if they want his involvement, which they surely will, then they will have to wait for The Winds of Winter to be written. Latest on The Winds of Winter, it's not that new news. He says he's not that far off. He says he hopes to have it done by August. Your guess is as good as mine. Nabless saying, love the input and I'd love to see you cover it. Your analysis is spot on. The more people talking Wheel of Time, the better. Obviously, I'm a big fan. So I've spotted some interest in the Wheel of Time. It doesn't. I've not yet seen it kind of snowball, but they've not done huge publicity on this yet. They've been announcing things through Twitter and all the rest of it, and but nothing yet in terms of what what we saw with The Witcher, with the sort of the dropping a few shots. First of all, we had a few shots of Geralt, and then we had a small teaser video, and then we had the trailers and all the rest of it. This kind of build up. We're nowhere near that yet, as far as I can tell. So it will take a little bit of time. Okay, let's have a quick flick through the chat. Yeah, so Andrew Kay, HBO exec, put out a statement that there was not near enough source material to go on with Blood Moon to probably get a prolonged series out of it. I think, I mean, the nuance that I got from the statement was that there wasn't the source material, so they had to create something completely new. And although he was lavishing praise on Jane Goldman, he basically said, you know, sometimes things just don't click. They just don't gel, I think was the word that he used. So that was what he said, you know, this was a huge ask to do something from scratch without the source material, and it's a lot easier when you do have the source material. That, I mean, it doesn't quite work for me because plenty of TV shows are created without having a book to adapt from. But I can certainly buy the idea, pardon me, that it just didn't work. Sometimes these things just don't work. You have to try things and to see whether or not they might work. And it's quite an expensive way of figuring out that something doesn't work. I heard a rumor of £10 million on spend just to get one episode filmed effectively, which is what happened. But yeah, maybe it didn't. My general take is a more cynical take, which is that they just decided that they wanted to have dragons, they wanted to have Targaryens, and this was just too out there for them. But, well, maybe we'll find out later in time. Okay, so let's switch to some more broad questions. So Leaf Underhill says, and just in reply to your thing you asked on Patreon about Doctor Who, yes, I just did those 2 videos. For those who are wondering, way back when I started this channel, I did cover not just Game of Thrones, I did 2 videos, completely random videos on Doctor Who. Didn't quite work out, didn't get many views on those ones, so I moved on. I covered Sherlock as well, season 3, I think it was, of Sherlock. So if you're interested in either of those things, by all means, go and check them out. And now I'm back to expanding out away from not just Game of Thrones, but into all the other shows and books that I love. Leaf Underhill also says, have you ever watched and or read Outlander? I get asked this quite a few times. The answer is no, I haven't read the books or watched the show. I tend to get quite a mixed reaction when this comes up. Some people saying, yeah, it's great, you'll love it. Other people going, yeah. So it's not really top of my list, I have to say, but maybe one day I will find myself watching it and kicking myself for having never done it, never done it at the time. Right, I've got one more question from my patrons, and then so now is a good time to drop anything into the chat for any more questions in the chat. I've got one more question from my patrons. This is from Maura Lee, saying, The Witcher, A Song of Ice and Fire, and the Lord of the Rings books have elves, nature spirits, the others. What do you think are their major roles in moving the stories along? Were these characters written in just to provide a high fantasy base for magic, or were they written to provide deeper lessons for us human beings to learn? Hence, Tom Bombadil, the others, to name a few. I think this is a really interesting question. So I talked a little bit earlier about J.R.R. Tolkien and his sort of how he brought the relationship between humans or the characters and the natural world around them, and this was an important theme through Tolkien. Tom Bombadil wasn't in the films, but is a fantastic character in the books. He is effectively this kind of representation of the Earth, and he is, you could argue, the most powerful character we ever meet there, but completely neutral in the best possible way. Is that they have a debate, the Council of Elrond, about whether they should give the ring to Tom Bombadil, because he seems not to be affected by it in the slightest. He does magic tricks with it. He does all the rest of it. And Gandalf says, well, yeah, he wouldn't be affected by it, but he would just forget about it. The Earth, the message seems to be, it's above all of this, all of the stuff that we've got going on. That's not the important thing here. The Earth just abides. And so that is very clearly there. When we get the elves obviously, yes, they are these magical, wonderful beings, but they are also representations of living in harmony with the world. They don't chop down trees. They use the trees and the world that they're in and become a part of it and listen to it and understand it. Humans do the opposite. They are chopping down the trees. They are molding the environment, and that, in many ways, is great and fantastic and good. And in other ways, it shows that we're just being uncaring and changing the environment that we're in for the worse. And Tolkien was wanting us to see these things. He wasn't preaching about them, but he was wanting us to recognize the importance on our environment, of the things that we do. And I think that works across to things that George R. R. Martin talks about. The whole plot, if you go all the way back, the first bits we get about is that we have, effectively, from what we can tell, we've got the children of the forest living happily. There were giants there and all the rest of it. This was before anything seemed to have gone wrong. And then humans come in, chopping down trees and just clattering about and all the rest of it. And that's when conflict seems to enter the world. Now, that's, to a certain degree, I'm sure that's not telling the whole story. I'm sure there was conflict before that, but that is the way that the story is told. And certainly on the show, the White Walkers emerge from that conflict. They are the effects, they are the results of that conflict. So again, they are this representation of the outcome of when you have conflict against those who are living in harmony with nature, and it will come back to bite you. So there are these kind of levels going on there. Everything really in late 20th century, early 21st century fantasy fiction in some way is either conforming to or reacting against Tolkien. And we'll find a lot of George R. R. Martin is reacting against Tolkien. He loves Tolkien, but he tries to write in a way that is not living within that niche. You look at the world of The Witcher, it's very much within the shadow of Tolkien. You get elves living in the forests, you get dwarves doing their mining and all the rest of it. We understand the tropes, so we do not need to be told the details of it. The Wheel of Time, incidentally, is also very much in the shadow of Tolkien. You get Ogrins and Trollocs, and we understand immediately that these are ogres and trolls. And you get the kind of the wise magician character who guides people off on this quest and all the rest of it. It's very much in this kind of vein. That doesn't mean that they're inferior acts of creation, but it does mean that they are nodding towards the giants on whose shoulders they are standing. To mix some metaphors there, but that's how I see that all working out. It isn't just this is ecological stuff that I have to ram in here. It's helping us to think through all these issues. Dogo Doyer, I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you very much for the super chat, saying, "Hi, Robert, my first super chat ever." Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. Which is your favorite chapter of all of the A Song of Ice and Fire material by George R. R. Martin, and why? Which POV do you enjoy the most? Oh, well, you've chosen a tough question for your first one. In terms of point of view, I don't think it will be a surprise. Tyrion is my favorite point of view character. I just love being inside his head. The way that George R. R. Martin writes his perspective on the world is, and you just hear him working through stuff, trying to figure things out. When there's like these long-running mysteries about who sent the assassin to go and try and kill Bran, it happens over several books, and in just little bits. Whenever it sort of comes up, you just suddenly hear his brain figuring stuff out and trying to understand it. And that I just love the way that you learn so much about his character through that. So I think that's good. Cersei as well, I think, is a really well. I think he writes Cersei very well. You understand her as a character and her prejudices and her worldview, which means that she sees things in a different way to most other people. In terms of favorite chapters, I think I find this one quite hard. The Red Wedding chapter, I think, is obviously harrowing, a classic one. I've reread Dany at the House of the Undying many times, I have to say, and I always really enjoy that because there is so much in there. And perhaps that is the kind of chapter that really works for me, is the kind of ones where it's you can read through it once and just enjoy it for what it is and what is presented to you. And in that chapter, it is supposed to come as this kind of blurry flood of images coming at you one after the other that you can't quite compute, but all at the same time. But it rewards you rereading it and slowing down and just focusing in on individual things. And that shows George R. R. Martin thinking across the piece, not just about what's going on with Dany, but also there's an image of the Red Wedding in there. He's already thinking about things that aren't going to happen yet in the books. There's a little bit there with Rhaegar and Elliot, which just adds to our understanding of that dynamic. And there are hints about her future and characters who, if you're thinking forward to the Winds of Winter, characters that she's not going to meet until then, and this is the shows for me a lot of the majesty of George R. R. Martin, which is that he makes a lot of play about this fact that he's a Gardner writer and he just kind of figures it out as he's going along. But chapters like that one with the House of the Undying show that he thinks ahead. And when he's doing his gardening, it's to fit in with what he's already worked out. He's not just making it up on the fly. He has already been putting in all these allusions to what's going to be happening. He knows the broad thread of what's going to be happening. So don't believe that he's just making it up as he goes along. He has a huge amount of thought about what's happening in the later books as well. Okay, that's the last question I've got from my patrons. Let's have a quick flick through, see if there's any more questions in the chat. Chili Roo saying, my favourite characters are Shara Dane, even though she's never really appeared in the books. Most fascinating characters. Yeah, absolutely. I think she is fascinating. She's going to be coming up in my next video in the Robert's Rebellion series. We're going to be meeting her again there. Why Ned goes to Starfall. She's only mentioned, I think, 12 times by name in the entire stories, but the amount of focus on her is astonishing. She's a bit like, I think George Lucas talked about Boba Fett as being a character that he just threw in as here's a cool, interesting character, and then was completely taken aback by the huge interest in him, because he was expecting him just to be this sort of like slightly sideline character, just somebody over there, and then suddenly everybody was really excited and wanting to know what's the backstory to him, what's his motivations and all the rest of it. I thought, well, I just created Ashara Dame is a bit like that, in that she doesn't really appear that much, but is so fascinating. Everybody wants to know more about her. Photo for foreshadowing with a Song of Ice and Fire question. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Assuming the timeline is all wrong, okay, could the Hammer of the Waters have split the Westeros at the north as well as the south? Hence the 5 forts in Essos. Okay, so I won't get into all of the timeline business here. So the Hammer of the Waters, for those who aren't aware, the story we're told is that the children of the forest, when they're faced with humanity just pouring in over from Essos, there was a land bridge between Essos, what is now the disputed lands, and Dawn. The first men were coming in across that. They cast this magic spell, hugely powerful, which just broke the arm. And so what we have now are the stepstones, which are just hundreds of these little islands between at the bottom of the narrow sea between Dawn and Essos. And that used to be a land bridge, but it got destroyed by the Hammer of the Waters. This is the story we're told. The story we're told is that they did it another time and it didn't work quite as well, when they were trying to separate off the north, which is why at the neck it's all swampy and it's all largely underwater, except for there's just this one causeway which goes through the neck where the Cranach Benmar. There's this one causeway which is the King's Road that goes through Moat Cailin, which is this it's now broken down, ruined castle. This was the fortification which kept the north protected. Now, there are a few hints there about that suggest maybe not all is exactly what we know. We got told that the Children of the Forest cast their spells from Moat Cailin, from the tallest tower of Moat Cailin, but that is a human fortification, so that doesn't quite make sense. So there are a few things that don't quite add up. In terms of whether the Hammers of the Waters could have split Westeros at its north, yes, it could have done. And I think that whichever way you look at it, that seems to have been the intention, is to cut off the north from the south. Now, the standard reason is that this was to prevent the people, the humans, from keeping on moving north and trying to protect the north, the children of the forest in the north. Some people believe perhaps it is trying to protect the south from the north, so preventing the White Walkers, the others, from coming all the way south through there. Either way, yes, I think that the intention was very clearly to create a blockage at that point, which was largely but not completely successful. And the 5 forts in Essos, right at the far east of Essos, we get 5 forts which seem to be, we talk about them a lot, again, like Ashara Dane, we talk about them a lot, but we don't know huge amounts about them. So it's easy to speculate, but they do sound like defensive structures, perhaps looking eastwards, perhaps because protecting Essos from the others coming that direction. So yes, that's entirely possible. My personal take is that I think that although it was slightly more complicated than we're perhaps told, the Hammer of the Waters was largely as we no, it was to try and prevent humans coming across, and then it was tried again to sort of prevent them getting even further north. And then after that, that was when we get the pact. So that seems to be, as far as I'm concerned, what the best timeline is. Didelphi Morphia, hello again, thank you. Saying, hi Robert, LML believes that Bloodstone Emperor was the original Azor Ahai. I wonder if the Azor Ahai reborn means that the Bloodstone Emperor will literally be reborn in some form. Okay, so this is Eastern mythology. So this is the Bloodstone Emperor was a legendary emperor over in sort of the T-Way, far off in the east. Now, there are legends there that sound very suspiciously like the legends that we have in Westeros with the Long Night. So the Bloodstone Emperor, he has, I will go into this, but I'm going to go to Yi in the Traveler's Guide in 4 weeks' time. So I'll go into this a little bit more detail there, but there's also this kind of Nisa vibes going on there with murdering lovers and things like that. Now, it's possible that this was that. It's possible that this is just a story which is spread out across the whole world and has been interpreted in different ways and has had different expressions in different parts of the world, because that's how legends work. Much like in our world, you will find the legend of the flood it's not universal, but lots of different cultures have it. You'll find, obviously, it's written in the Bible. You can look at Babylonian records. You can go to India. You'll find records there. Clearly there was some kind of cataclysmic flooding event that has been remembered in different ways, and the stories are all slightly different, but there is some truth there. That seems to be what's going on here, but who knows is the short answer. Yeah, I like the idea that perhaps there is some secret mystery over in the East, but George R.R. Martin is not going to tell us, I think, is the short answer. I think that where we're at with George R.R. Martin is that he is deliberately keeping mythology, legends, legendary, mythological. That's the world in which that he has created. And he is getting echoes of those things happening in today's world, in the world of the story of Song of Ice and Fire. So the importance of them is not so much what actually happened all that time ago. I don't think we're suddenly going to get somebody discover an ancient tome saying that says, oh, actually, you know, that legend of what was going on with the Bloodstone Emperor, this was the truth of what happened. And that person was Azor Ahai. These are symbols, and they're symbols, and they're sort of past echoes of what is going to be happening in the story that we are coming to. So that is their role within the story. I don't think we're just going to suddenly get talked about it earlier in the stream. George R.R. Martin deals in this story with subjective truths, not objective truths. He deals with how people react to stories and myths and prophecies and things like that, not the actual truth of the story or the myth or the prophecy. So whether the Bloodstone Emperor will literally be reborn in some form, it's entirely possible that some people will believe that. That is entirely possible. But we are never going to be told that that actually is the Bloodstone Emperor. In the same way, and I've used to say this on an almost weekly basis, the conversation has moved on a little bit since then, but I am convinced that once the books have finished, we will still be discussing who was Azor Ahai reborn. There will be answers that look like they make sense, but it will not be written. George R.R. Martin is not going to write a line that says, oh, by the way, editor's note, this proves that Jon was Azor Ahai Reborn, or this proves that Daenerys was Azor Ahai Reborn, or whatever. It's going to still be something for us to debate and something for people to be debating within that world, if that makes sense. So literally be reborn, possibly, but more important is the figuratively be reborn. Mod Mary 1, thank you for the super chat, saying, wouldn't it be cool if the Winds of Winter prologue started with an other point of view, or from the others? Yes, it would. I don't think it will, though. This comes up a few times. The prologue. What's the prologue to the Winds of Winter going to be? The reason why it's quite interesting is that the prologues tend to introduce important concepts that we will come back to during that book. So we get Varamir Sixskins, which tells us about how skin changes survive death. We get the others, obviously introduced in the prologue to book 1 and things like that. So that's where they're important. And always the POV character dies. And they're not like a main person normally. They're just like obviously some other random person. Often that is their only POV chapter. Now, this comes up quite a lot. What is the POV chapter at the beginning of the Winds of Winter going to be? Usually people, and I've still not found this on So Spake Martin, which is a collection of everything George R. R. Martin says. People often say George R. R. Martin has said, and I think Aziz from History of Westeros, who will know, so I'm not doubting him in the slightest. He's very knowledgeable on these things. George R. R. Martin has said that the prologue chapter will be Robb Stark's wife, Jane Westling. So that is where apparently it's going to be, or she will appear in it, not necessarily her. That's what we think it's going to be. There are lots that I would like, but I think that's where it's going to be, and I'm intrigued by it because I can't, off the top of my head, without doing a proper study, but I can't see the criticality of that POV, which is why I'm excited, because it will be critical, and I like it when George R. R. Martin blindsides me. Sonata Systems, thanks from New Mexico. Thank you for the super chat. That's incredibly generous. Thank you so much. A few people saying about the merch. I should have my. Have I got my? I should do this, shouldn't I? So my merch, if you're interested in merch, that was just an in Deep Geek mug. You can get lots of different bits of merch. There is a link down there, probably in the chat as well. Thank you very much. Not good of I'm not good at selling merch, but there we go. That's it. Jamie McKenna saying, hi Roberts, just finished reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms per your recommendation. I liked it so much I gifted it to my little brother for his birthday today. Thanks. I'm really pleased. If you've never read A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the Duncan Egg stories, they are magical. They're lovely. They are within the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, about 100 years beforehand, written in a very different style. They're more whimsical. They're lighter. They're funny, but they don't lose any of the depth, and you learn so much more about the world through these characters. And the characters of Duncan Egg, particularly the character of Dunk, Sir Duncan the Tall, wonderful, absolutely wonderful creations. Okay, so let's just having a quick flick back through the chat, see if there's anything else going on there. Yeah, a lot of people talking about he never gives all of the answers. I think that's absolutely right. George R. R. Martin doesn't. He wants us to be debating and discussing these things rather than just telling us an objective truth. We're not going to find out. Absolutely. Okay, I think that is about it. Dunk the Lunk, think of the castle wall. I would highly recommend, by the way, actually, sorry, I was just quoting somebody from the chat, not just completely random. I would highly recommend the audiobooks, actually, if you're going to read the Dunk and Egg stories. They're wonderful written stories as they are, but the audiobooks, which are read by Larry Lloyd, who is Viserys on the TV show, are as good an audio narration as any I've ever heard. And I don't say that lightly. I think he just gets it absolutely right. The tone, the voices, the intonations, just perfect. So I would highly recommend that. Okay, I think I'm going to round it up now. So guys, thank you so much for this. Particularly thanks for the super chats. Fantastic questions today. I'll be back next week, same time, for another live stream. Hopefully going to have some guests on for the next couple of weeks. I do like doing these open Q&As, but I also really like having people on to sort of chat through issues with, get a different perspective on. What I try and do is I don't think that I have a monopoly on wisdom or knowledge in any of these worlds that I cover. Other people have got so much to add to this, and that's why I try and get people onto this channel as much as possible. But okay, guys, I'm going to call that a day now. Thank you so much. If you're watching this a little bit later, not live, then somewhere around here is going to be appearing a link to my Patreon page toward the end of the stream. If you are at all interested in either supporting the channel or getting access to some exclusive stuff I do for my patrons, somewhere around here is going to be appearing a link to my other live streams if you just want to watch or listen to some more live streams. So thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Please do go and try and check out The Well Told Tale. If you're into podcasts, please do go and try and find that. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I shall see you next week.